Young nurse covered a sleeping man with her jacket at the hospital. The Millionaire CEO woke up and, "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more emotional millionaire stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now, let's get back to our main character. It was almost midnight in the quiet hallway of St. Clair Hospital. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. Emma, a young nurse with tired eyes and a heart too big for her own good, had just finished her 10th hour of a 12-hour shift. She moved quietly from room to room, checking on patients, her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. Her blue uniform was slightly wrinkled, and a few loose strands of her blonde hair had escaped her ponytail, framing her face. She stopped by the nurse's station, rubbing her sore wrist and glancing at the clock. 2 more hours, she told herself. Just 2 more. As she reached for a chart, she heard a soft groan coming from the end of the hallway. Her instincts kicked in, and she rushed toward the sound. Inside the dimly lit waiting area, she found a man in a sharp navy suit slumped on one of the chairs. His tie was loosened, and his hair was slightly damp with sweat. He looked out of place there, too refined for a hospital waiting room. Emma knelt beside him, her voice calm but firm. "Sir? Are you okay?" The man didn't respond at first. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow. Emma touched his wrist to check his pulse. It was faint but steady. She reached for his shoulder and gently shook him. "Sir, can you hear me?" Slowly, his eyelids fluttered open, revealing a pair of piercing blue eyes. He looked dazed, confused, and clearly exhausted. I just needed a minute," he mumbled, his voice low and hoarse. Emma frowned. "You don't look okay. You should see a doctor." He tried to protest, but when he moved to stand, his knees buckled. Emma quickly caught him by the arm, steadying him. "Hey, easy there. You're not going anywhere until you've been checked." The man hesitated, glancing down at his expensive watch before sighing in defeat. "Fine," he muttered. Emma smiled faintly, the kind of smile that reassures patients even when she's running on fumes. "That's better," she said softly. She helped him into a nearby wheelchair, noticing how his suit jacket hung slightly loose, as though he had lost weight recently. She grabbed a spare blanket from a nearby shelf and draped it over his shoulders. The moment she did, he looked up at her, surprised by the small act of kindness. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know," Emma replied, tightening the blanket around him, "but I wanted to." Their eyes met for a moment, hers full of warmth, his full of fatigue, and something unspoken passed between them. "What's your name?" she asked as she started to push the wheelchair toward the exam room. "Liam," he said after a pause. "Liam Parker." Emma nodded. "Well, Mr. Parker, let's make sure you're okay." He gave a faint smile. "Just Liam," he corrected softly. As they moved down the hallway, the hum of the hospital surrounded them. The other nurses barely noticed as Emma guided him into an empty room and helped him onto the bed. She adjusted the blanket again, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You really didn't have to help me," he said again, watching her with quiet curiosity. "I know," she said, smiling gently. "But sometimes people need someone to look after them, even the ones who look like they have everything together." Liam looked at her for a long moment, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. "You have no idea," he murmured, almost to himself. Emma didn't hear him clearly, but she caught the exhaustion in his tone. She turned to check the monitor beside his bed, her expression softening. She had no way of knowing that the man she had just helped was one of the most powerful CEOs in New York, a millionaire who had built his empire from nothing. To her, he was just another patient in need of care. But to Liam, she was the first person in a long time who had seen him not as a name or a title, but as a man. And in that quiet hospital room, under the harsh glow of fluorescent light, a small spark began to form, one that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, the hospital was quieter than usual. The night's chaos had faded, replaced by the hum of machines and the distant chatter of nurses exchanging shifts. Emma walked through the hall with a cup of coffee in her hand, her mind still replaying what had happened the night before. She had not been able to shake the image of the man in the expensive suit, pale and exhausted, sitting alone under the harsh lights. There was something about him that lingered in her thoughts, something beyond his appearance. He had seemed lost. When she reached the nurse's station, she checked the chart for room 203, the one where she had left him to rest after his vitals stabilized. According to the notes, he had slept most of the night. Emma exhaled, relieved, before taking a sip of her coffee. She reminded herself that he was just another patient, someone who had probably pushed himself too hard and needed a break. Still, she could not help but wonder why a man like him, clearly wealthy and powerful, had been alone in a hospital hallway at midnight. Before she could dwell on it further, a familiar voice called out. "Morning, Emma," said Grace, another nurse, grinning as she handed her a clipboard. "Room 203's awake. Your mystery man's asking for you." Emma blinked in surprise. "For me?" "Yeah," Grace said with a teasing smile. "Seems like you made quite an impression." Emma rolled her eyes but felt a small flutter in her chest. She set down her coffee and made her way toward room 203, trying to ignore the way her heart was beating a little too fast. When she opened the door, Liam was sitting up in bed, his jacket neatly folded on the chair beside him. His hair was slightly tousled, and there was a softness in his expression that had not been there the night before. "Good morning," Emma said, her tone professional but kind. "How are you feeling?" Liam looked up, and for a moment his eyes softened when he saw her. "Better, thanks to you," he replied. His voice was smoother now, though it still carried that deep, controlled tone she had noticed before. Emma smiled politely as she adjusted the monitor beside his bed. "You had mild exhaustion and dehydration. Nothing too serious, but you need to take it easy for a few days. Long work hours?" Liam hesitated before answering, his gaze drifting toward the window. "Something like that," he said quietly. Emma glanced at him, sensing that there was more he was not saying. She had learned not to pry, especially with patients who carried themselves like him, people who were used to control and privacy. Still, she could not help but feel curious. "You were lucky you came here when you did," she said softly. "Another hour and you might have collapsed somewhere much worse." Liam chuckled faintly, shaking his head. "I am not used to being the one people worry about." "Well," Emma replied, smiling, "there's a first time for everything." He looked at her again, really looked, and something about her calm confidence disarmed him. "You are not like most people I meet," he said after a pause. Emma raised an eyebrow, half amused. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "It is definitely a good thing," Liam said, his voice low, almost thoughtful. "Most people only see what they can get from me. You just helped." Emma brushed off the compliment, pretending to focus on her chart. "It is my job," she said simply. "And besides, you looked like you needed someone to remind you to slow down." Liam smiled faintly. "Maybe I did." For a moment, the room fell into a comfortable silence. The morning light spilled through the blinds, casting a warm glow over the sterile white walls. It felt oddly peaceful. Emma checked his IV, then looked at him one last time. "Get some rest, Mr. Parker," she said gently. "The doctor will check on you soon." "It is Liam," he corrected softly, his eyes following her as she turned to leave. "Thank you, Emma." She paused at the door, offering a quick nod before stepping into the hallway. As she walked away, she could still feel the weight of his gaze lingering on her. She tried to push the thought aside, reminding herself that patients came and went every day. But something about him stayed with her, the way he had looked at her, the quiet gratitude in his voice. And though she did not know it yet, that small moment of kindness had already set something bigger in motion, something that would intertwine their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Over the next few days, Emma continued to see Liam around the hospital. He was supposed to be discharged after just one night, but the doctor insisted that he rest for a little longer. His blood pressure had been unstable, and his exhaustion ran deeper than he admitted. Each morning when Emma came in, she would find him sitting by the window, dressed neatly in a hospital robe that somehow still looked expensive. He would be reading something on his phone or laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You should not be working," Emma said one morning as she entered the room, setting down a tray of breakfast. Liam looked up with a faint smile. "If I stop working, everything stops," he replied lightly. "That sounds dramatic," she said, amused. "You make it sound like the world depends on you." "Not the world," he said with a hint of humor in his tone. "Just a few thousand employees." Emma blinked, realizing he was not joking. "You run a company?" she asked. Liam nodded casually, taking a sip of water. "Parker Industries. We specialize in urban development and renewable projects." Emma frowned slightly. pretending to focus on adjusting the IV. "That sounds big." "It is," he said simply, not with arrogance, but with the calm confidence of someone used to carrying responsibility. For a moment, Emma did not know what to say. She was used to treating people from all walks of life, but there was something about Liam that stood apart. He had the kind of presence that made people stop and listen. Yet, here he was sitting in a hospital bed, completely human and fragile beneath all that power. "Maybe that is your problem," she said finally. "You are so busy taking care of the world that you forget to take care of yourself." Liam smiled softly, setting his glass down. "You sound like my mother." "Then she must be a very smart woman," Emma said, her tone half playful. "She was," Liam replied quietly, his eyes turning distant for a moment. The shift in his voice caught Emma off guard. She sensed a heaviness behind his calm exterior, a sadness he carried but did not show. "I am sorry," she said softly. He gave a small nod. It was a long time ago. The silence that followed was not awkward, just quiet, filled with the sound of monitors and distant footsteps in the hall. Emma wrote something in his chart, trying not to look at him too long. There was something about him that unsettled her in ways she could not explain. Later that afternoon, she passed by his room again. Liam was on a call, his tone firm, his words clipped and commanding. "I said push the deal to next week. No, I do not care what the investors say. We are not rushing it." The authority in his voice filled the room. Emma paused at the doorway, catching a glimpse of the man behind the charm, the leader, the strategist, the perfectionist. But when he saw her standing there, his expression softened instantly. "Sorry," he said after hanging up. "Work never stops." Emma smiled faintly. "You really do not know how to rest, do you?" "Maybe not," he admitted. "But I am trying." She shook her head, crossing her arms. "Well, you are a terrible patient," Liam chuckled, leaning back against the pillow. "I have been told worse." The way he said it made her laugh despite herself. It was strange he had this ability to make her forget how tired she was, how heavy her days usually felt. There was an ease in their conversations that surprised her. He was used to control, yet he never tried to control her. When her shift ended that evening, Emma stopped by his room one last time. He was asleep, his laptop still open on the side table. The glow from the screen reflected off his face, making him look peaceful for the first time since she met him. Without thinking, she reached for the blanket and gently pulled it up to his chest, just as she had that first night. "Good night, Mr. Parker," she whispered. As she turned to leave, she did not notice that Liam's eyes opened slightly, watching her through half-closed lids. A faint smile touched his lips as he whispered to the empty room, "Good night, Emma." It was a small moment, but it was the beginning of something neither of them could name, yet something that would only grow stronger with time. 2 days later, Liam was finally cleared to be discharged. The nurses gathered the last of his paperwork, and Emma helped him pack his few belongings. He had recovered quickly, though she suspected his body had not been the only thing that needed rest. "You are free to go," she said, handing him the final form to sign. "Try not to overwork yourself again." Liam smiled as he took the pen from her hand, their fingers brushing for the briefest second. "No promises," he said softly. She rolled her eyes but could not hide her small smile. "I mean it," she said. "Your body is trying to tell you something. Maybe it is time to listen." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe you are right." Once the paperwork was done, Emma helped him into the hallway. As they walked toward the exit, several hospital staff members greeted her warmly, though she noticed how some of them glanced curiously at the well-dressed man beside her. Liam, as usual, seemed unfazed by the attention. Outside, the morning sun poured across the parking lot, and a black sedan waited near the entrance. A man in a suit stepped out immediately and opened the door for Liam. "Mr. Parker, we have your schedule for the week," he began, but Liam raised a hand, stopping him. "Cancel everything for today," Liam said firmly. "I am taking the day off." The assistant blinked in surprise, clearly not used to those words. "Yes, sir." Emma raised an eyebrow, amused. "Taking my advice already?" Liam chuckled. "You made quite the impression, Nurse Emma." "Good," she said, crossing her arms. "You could use some balance in your life." He tilted his head, studying her for a moment. "You know," he said, "most people do not talk to me like that." "Then maybe most people should," she replied without hesitation. For a moment, he said nothing, just smiled, the kind of smile that felt sincere, almost boyish. "Can I thank you properly?" he asked. "Maybe over coffee, when you are not saving the world one patient at a time?" Emma hesitated, caught off guard by the invitation. "Coffee. Just coffee," he said, his tone gentle but hopeful. "Nothing formal, nothing complicated." She looked at him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "All right, coffee." His grin widened, and he gave a small nod to his driver before turning back to her. "Tomorrow, then?" "Tomorrow," she confirmed, trying not to let him see the small flutter in her chest. As he climbed into the car, he glanced back at her through the window. "See you soon, Emma." She smiled and gave a small wave before heading back inside. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She tried to focus, but her mind kept drifting back to the strange man with the tired eyes and the charming smile. By the time she got home that evening, she could not stop herself from replaying their conversation. The next day, when she arrived at the small coffee shop downtown, Liam was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups waiting on the table. He looked different out of his suit, more relaxed, though still effortlessly put together. "You are early," she said as she approached. "I did not want to risk you changing your mind," he said with a grin. She laughed softly and sat down. The first few minutes were filled with small talk about the hospital, his recovery, and the ridiculous price of coffee, but soon, the conversation turned deeper. Liam told her about his company, how he had started from nothing, how the pressure of running a massive corporation sometimes felt unbearable. Emma listened quietly, surprised by how open he was. "You know," she said, "you talk about your success like it is a burden." "Sometimes it is," he admitted. "People see the cars, the money, the title. They do not see what it costs." "And what does it cost?" she asked. He paused, looking at her for a moment before answering. "Time, freedom, peace." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She looked at him differently then. Not as a powerful CEO, but as a man who had built walls so high he could barely see over them. "Maybe," she said softly, "it is time you start finding those things again." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I already have." Emma blushed, quickly looking away. But in that quiet coffee shop, with the morning light streaming through the glass and the sound of the city outside, something shifted between them, a connection that neither of them expected, but neither could deny. Days turned into weeks, and what started as a simple cup of coffee became something more. Emma and Liam began to meet regularly, always under the pretense of casual conversations. But both of them knew it had become more than that. They found comfort in each other's company, a strange kind of balance between her quiet simplicity and his fast-paced, demanding world. Emma learned that Liam was not the arrogant businessman she had imagined. He was thoughtful, kind, and surprisingly humble. He listened when she talked, genuinely interested in her stories about the hospital, her patients, and the small moments that made her days meaningful. In return, Liam opened up about his life, how he had built his empire from scratch, how success had cost him friendships, trust, and sometimes even sleep. It was during one of their usual coffee meetings that he finally said, "You make me feel normal." Emma looked up from her cup, her brows furrowed slightly. "Normal?" He smiled softly. "I spend every day surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear, people who see a title, not a person. But when I am with you, I can just be me. No expectations, no pressure." Emma felt her chest tighten at his words, though she tried to play it off with a small laugh. "Maybe you just needed a nurse to remind you to slow down." "Maybe I did," he said, his tone warm and sincere. As time went on, Liam began stopping by the hospital, bringing her coffee during long shifts or waiting outside just to walk her home. Some of the nurses teased her about it, whispering that she had caught the attention of a rich man, but Emma ignored them. She did not care about his money or his status. What mattered was the way he treated her, the way he made her feel seen. One evening, after a particularly long day, she found him waiting by the hospital entrance. The city lights reflected in his eyes as he smiled. "Rough day?" he asked. "You could say that," she replied, letting out a tired sigh. A kid came in with a broken arm, then an elderly patient coded. It has been non-stop since morning. Without a word, Liam handed her a cup of coffee, her favorite kind, just the way she liked it. "Then this should help," he said softly. She smiled, taking it from him. "You know," she said after a moment, "you are not making it easy for me to keep my boundaries." Liam chuckled, his voice low. "I am not trying to make it easy. I am trying to make it real." The sincerity in his tone caught her off guard. For a moment, she did not know how to respond. Instead, she just looked at him, the powerful CEO who had every reason to be cold and untouchable, but somehow was standing here with her, looking at her as if she was the only thing in his world. "You are dangerous, Liam," she said finally, half joking. "And you are exactly what I needed," he replied without hesitation. His honesty left her speechless. She looked away, her cheeks warm, but inside, something in her shifted. The walls she had built around her heart started to crumble. From that night on, their connection deepened. They shared quiet dinners, long conversations, and laughter that came easily. It was simple, but it was real. Emma found herself thinking about him even when she tried not to. She knew their worlds were different. She was a nurse working 12-hour shifts, and he was a man who could buy an entire hospital if he wanted to, but somehow, when they were together, none of that seemed to matter. One night, as they walked by the river, Liam stopped suddenly. "Emma," he said, his voice serious, "I do not know where this is going, but I know I do not want it to stop." She looked at him, her heart pounding. "I am not sure I am ready for this," she admitted quietly. "Neither am I," he said, smiling softly. "But maybe that is what makes it worth it." The wind blew gently through her hair, and in that moment, under the soft glow of the city lights, she realized something. This was no longer just a friendship or a coincidence. This was the beginning of something deeper, something real, and neither of them could turn back now. Weeks passed, and their bond grew stronger. Emma and Liam fell into an unspoken rhythm that neither had planned, yet both had come to rely on. He would appear at the hospital some mornings with coffee in hand, and she would smile every time she saw him waiting by the entrance after her shift. They talked about everything: her childhood in a small town, his early struggles building his company, the things they had lost along the way. Liam had a way of making her feel safe, seen, and valued, something she had not felt in a long time. But with every moment of happiness came a quiet fear she could not ignore. She was falling for him, deeply and completely, and that terrified her. One night, after a long day at the hospital, Emma invited Liam to her apartment for dinner. It was a small space, warm and cozy, filled with little touches of her personality: art supplies on the table, a stack of medical journals, and a sketch of the city she had drawn months ago. Liam looked around, his eyes soft with admiration. "This feels like you," he said, taking in the space. "Simple, beautiful, real." She laughed lightly. "Translation, you mean small?" "No," he said with a grin. "I mean perfect." They ate together, sharing stories and laughter until late in the evening. For the first time in a while, Emma allowed herself to feel comfortable, to imagine what life could be like if moments like this could last. After dinner, they sat on the couch, a quiet moment stretching between them. Liam looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Emma," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," she replied, setting down her glass. "Why do you do it? The long hours, the exhaustion, the constant pressure. Why nursing?" She thought for a moment before answering. "Because it matters," she said finally. "Because I see people at their lowest, and if I can make even one person feel a little less alone, it is worth it." Liam watched her closely, admiration clear in his eyes. "You have more strength than you realize," he said. "You are one of the few people I have met who gives without expecting anything back." Emma looked away, trying to hide the blush creeping up her cheeks. "Maybe I just like to fix things," she said softly. "Then maybe I am lucky you found me," Liam replied, his tone warm but sincere. The room fell quiet again, the air charged with something unspoken. When their eyes met, Emma felt her heart skip a beat. She had been fighting this for weeks, telling herself it was just friendship, but in that moment, she knew it was more. And when Liam leaned in and kissed her, gentle, careful, as if asking permission she did not pull away, the world seemed to pause. It was not the kind of kiss that came from impulse, but one that came from understanding, from connection. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke. There were no promises, no declarations, just silence filled with meaning. Later that night, as Emma stood by the window after he left, she could still feel the warmth of his hand on hers. A part of her wanted to believe that what they had could last, but another part whispered warnings she could not silence. Their worlds were too different. He lived in boardrooms and penthouses. She lived in scrubs and small apartments. How could something so fragile survive between them? The next day, at the hospital, Emma found herself distracted. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it was him. And it always was small messages, thoughtful words, things that made her heart race. But she also noticed something else. The other nurses had begun to talk, whispering when she walked by, their glances lingering a little too long. She tried to ignore it, but the rumors spread quickly. Some said she was seeing a rich patient, others said she was after his money. It stung more than she wanted to admit. That night, when Liam called, she hesitated before answering. "Hey," his voice came through, warm as always. "Rough day? Something like that?" she said quietly. "People talk, Liam. Let them," he said. "They do not know what we have." She smiled faintly, but her heart ached. "You do not understand," she whispered. "They will never see us the way we see each other." There was a long pause on the line before he spoke again. "Then we will show them," he said simply. "We will show them what real means." And even though doubt still lingered, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that love, real, honest love, could survive the noise of the world. As the days passed, it became harder for Emma to ignore the whispers at the hospital. Her co-workers' smiles had turned sharp, and their curiosity had become judgment. Every time she walked through the hall, she could feel their eyes on her. Some of them stopped talking when she entered the break room, others gave her knowing looks and muttered under their breath. It was not just gossip anymore. It was a wall between her and the people she had once called friends. One afternoon, while she was reviewing patient files, Grace approached her hesitantly. "Emma," she said carefully, "you know I like you, but people are starting to talk. They are saying that man who keeps picking you up, he is that Parker. The one who owns half the city." Emma sighed, her pen still in her hand. "He is not just some man, Grace. He is someone I care about." Grace frowned. "I am not judging you, but you know how this looks. Nurses are not supposed to get involved with patients, especially ones like him." Emma met her friend's gaze, her voice firm but quiet. "He was not my patient anymore, and I did not plan any of this. It just happened." Grace shook her head slowly. "Just be careful, okay? People love to tear down what they do not understand." That night, when Emma left work, Liam was waiting outside, leaning against his car. The moment she saw him, the weight on her shoulders lifted just a little. He smiled, the kind of smile that made her forget the rest of the world. "Rough day?" he asked, opening the car door for her. She nodded. "You could say that." "Then, let me make it better," he said, his tone light. They drove to a quiet restaurant by the river, one of those places where the city lights shimmered on the water. It was peaceful, almost magical, and for a moment, Emma forgot about the rumors and the judgment. "I have been thinking," Liam said as they sat down. "About us." Emma froze slightly. "About us?" He nodded, his gaze steady. "I do not care what people say. I know who you are, and I know what this is. I want you in my life, Emma. Not as a secret, not as something temporary. For real." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "Liam, you do not have to do this. Your world is complicated. Mine is not." He reached across the table and took her hand. "That is exactly why I want you in it. You remind me what is real." She swallowed hard, her emotions threatening to spill over. "People will never understand. They do not have to," he said softly. "All that matters is us." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. For so long she had built her life on logic, routine, and self-control. But with him, all of that fell away. He made her believe in something she had stopped believing in: hope. The evening stretched on, filled with laughter and quiet conversation. When they left the restaurant, the air was cool, and the city glowed around them. They walked along the river, hand in hand, and for the first time in weeks, Emma felt at peace. "You know," Liam said, glancing at her, "I never thought I would find someone who could make me forget the rest of the world." She smiled. "And I never thought I would fall for someone who owns it." He laughed softly, pulling her closer. "Then I guess we are both surprised." But their peace did not last. The next morning, Emma walked into the hospital and noticed the silence. It was different tense. On the bulletin board near the nurses' station, someone had pinned a photo of her and Liam together from the night before, leaving little doubt about their relationship. Her stomach dropped. Grace approached her, her face pale. "Emma, I swear I did not know about this." Emma felt her hands tremble as she tore the picture down. "Who did this?" she demanded, but no one answered. All she could hear were the whispers, the judgment, the laughter from across the room. The same people who had once respected her were now watching her with disdain. By the end of her shift, she felt like she could not breathe. As she stepped outside, the cold air hit her face, and she blinked back tears. Liam was waiting by the car, but when he saw her expression, his smile faded instantly. "Emma, what happened?" She shook her head, her voice breaking. "They know. Everyone knows." He moved closer, his hand reaching for hers, but she pulled back slightly. "I cannot do this, Liam. I cannot be the reason people look at me like that." "Emma," he said softly, his voice steady but full of emotion, "let me handle this, please." But she turned away, her heart heavy. "You cannot fix this like one of your business deals," she whispered. "This is my life, my job, my reputation." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "Maybe we are too different after all." Liam's jaw tightened, but his voice was quiet. "I am not giving up on us." She shook her head, taking a step back. "Maybe you should." And with that, she turned and walked away, her heart breaking with every step, not knowing that this moment, their first real distance, would change everything between them. Days passed, but the silence between Emma and Liam grew heavier. She had stopped answering his calls, convincing herself that it was for the best. The hospital had become unbearable. The whispers had turned into stares, and the warmth she once felt at work had vanished. Every time she entered a patient's room, she could feel the judgment lingering in the air. Grace tried to defend her, but the damage was done. The photo had spread beyond the hospital. It had reached social media. Now, people knew her name not as a nurse, but as the woman rumored to be dating the city's most powerful CEO. Emma hated the attention. It was everything she had never wanted. Meanwhile, Liam was trying to fix things in his own way. His PR team wanted him to release a statement denying the relationship, but he refused. "I will not pretend she does not matter," he said firmly. His assistant warned him that investors were uneasy, but Liam did not care. For the first time in years, he was not thinking about business. He was thinking about Emma. One evening, he showed up at her apartment unannounced. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, her heart ached. He looked tired, his usual confidence replaced by something raw and real. "Liam," she said softly, "you should not be here." "I had to see you," he said, his voice steady but pleading. "Please, Emma, talk to me." She hesitated before stepping aside, letting him in. The small apartment felt even smaller with him there. He looked around for a moment before meeting her gaze. "I know what they are saying," he began, "and I know this is not easy for you. But I will not let them destroy what we have." Emma crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. "Liam, you do not understand. My job is on the line. People think I am using you. They think I only cared because of your money." "And you care what they think?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. "After everything we have been through?" "Of course I care," she snapped. "This is my career, my life. You can walk away from a scandal and still be fine. I cannot." Liam's jaw clenched as he stepped closer. "So what are you saying, that we just give up? That all of this meant nothing?" She looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "It means too much. That is the problem." He reached out, gently touching her cheek. "Emma, I love you," he said quietly. The words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. She froze, her breath catching. He had never said it before, not like this. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. "Do not say that," she whispered. "Not now." "It is the truth," he said, "and I will not take it back." She turned away, unable to look at him. "Liam, love is not always enough," she said softly. "Sometimes doing the right thing means letting go." He stood there in silence, his chest rising and falling with quiet frustration. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "If that is what you really want, I will walk away, but you should know I meant every word." She closed her eyes as he left, the door clicking softly behind him. When the sound faded, she collapsed onto the couch, tears spilling freely. She had pushed him away, but her heart screamed for him to stay. The next few weeks were unbearable. The gossip slowly died down, but the emptiness inside her did not. She threw herself into work, pretending that everything was fine, but nothing felt the same. Every patient she cared for reminded her of the man who had once made her believe in love again. And somewhere across the city, Liam buried himself in meetings, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. Every time his phone buzzed, he hoped it was her. Every night he replayed their last conversation, wondering if he had done the right thing by walking away. The city kept moving, But for them, time seemed to stand still, two people in love, separated by pride, fear, and the cruel eyes of the world. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to return to normal, or at least, that was what Emma told herself. She buried her feelings beneath long shifts and quiet nights, convincing herself that she had made the right decision. Yet every time she passed the hospital entrance where Liam used to wait for her, her heart ached. The city around her felt colder, emptier, as though something vital had been taken away. One evening, after finishing her shift, she stopped by the coffee shop they used to visit. The barista recognized her instantly and smiled. "The usual?" he asked, and she nodded without thinking. As she waited for her drink, she caught sight of the empty seat by the window where they had sat so many times before, talking and laughing as if the world outside did not exist. She blinked away the sting in her eyes and turned to leave, but the memory lingered. Across town, Liam sat in his office, surrounded by papers he could not focus on. His assistant had been updating him on quarterly reports, but none of it mattered. For weeks, he had tried to lose himself in work, but nothing filled the void Emma had left. He glanced at the photo on his desk phone that had been taken during a charity event at the hospital. Emma was in the background, smiling at someone off camera, unaware that he had been watching her. Without thinking, he stood up, grabbed his coat, and left the office. The driver asked where to go, but Liam only said, "Just drive." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Emma was finishing up a late-night shift when a commotion near the emergency entrance drew her attention. A car had pulled up, and someone was asking for help. She rushed forward, her instincts taking over, but stopped cold when she saw who it was. Liam. He was not hurt, just exhausted, standing in the rain without an umbrella, soaked to the bone. "Liam?" she said, her voice trembling. He looked up at her, his expression filled with emotion. "I tried to stay away," he said softly, "but I cannot. I do not care what people say, Emma. I just need you." She hesitated, torn between reason and the rush of emotion flooding her chest. "Liam, you cannot be here," she said, glancing at the other nurses watching from a distance. "They will talk again." "Let them," he said, his voice firm. "Let them say whatever they want. I am done living for other people's opinions. I am done pretending that you do not matter." Before she could reply, he stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You once told me that love is not always enough. Maybe you are right. But love is what makes everything else worth fighting for, and I will fight for this for us." The world seemed to fall away around them. The sound of rain softened, the chatter of the hospital faded, and for a moment it was just the two of them standing there, two hearts that had been through chaos, still finding their way back to each other. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "You should not have come." "I had to," he said, "because I realized something. You are not part of my world, Emma. You are my world." That broke her. All the walls she had built crumbled in an instant. She stepped forward, and before she could second-guess herself, she threw her arms around him. He held her tightly, his soaked coat pressing against her scrubs, and for the first time in weeks, she felt whole again. The nurses nearby looked on, whispering, but she did not care anymore. When they finally pulled apart, Liam brushed the rain from her face, his thumb lingering on her cheek. "I am not going anywhere this time," he said softly. She smiled through her tears. "Then I guess you better get used to hospital coffee." He laughed, that deep, familiar sound she had missed so much. "Only if you are the one bringing it." From that night on, things changed, not overnight, but slowly, steadily. The whispers at the hospital faded, replaced by quiet respect. People began to see what Emma and Liam had always known, that their love was not a scandal, but a story of two people from different worlds who refused to let those worlds define them. Months later, Emma stood in front of a new community clinic, the one Liam had funded in her name. The sign above the door read, "The Parker Wellness Center." Liam stood beside her, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling as the cameras flashed. "You did this," he whispered. "No," she replied softly. "We did this." And as the crowd applauded, Emma realized that sometimes the best love stories are not about perfection. They are about perseverance, forgiveness, and the courage to believe in second chances. And in that moment, standing beside the man who had once collapsed alone in a hospital waiting room, she knew she had found her forever.